Hey, what's up guys? So in this video, we'll be creating a simple React app just like this one. And the goal of creating this React app is to help you understand how to perform CRUD operations using React, Axios, and Firebase real-time database. So right here, we have a form where we can enter a new entry, and the name can be Charles. The unit can be JS and a grade of an A. Now when I submit, we have a cool loader there, and once the data is submitted, we'll have a cool pop-up. You added a new entry, and when we look at our results here, you can see that the entry was actually added. Now we have two buttons for each entry, a remove button and an update button. When I click the update button, we'll have a cool React model which pops up, and we have the data already filled on our fields so that we can easily edit the data. Now right here, I can just say JavaScript, and when I click update, we'll have a cool loader again, and the entry is updated. And when you look here, it was actually updated. Now to remove the data, all you need to do is to just click remove, and entry will be removed. So in this React app, we won't be using any state management library, so that you can understand how to manage state in React apps and also how to use React props. Okay. In case you're new here, my name is Charles. I am a JavaScript developer, a coffee lover, and I create coding content here on YouTube. Now that sounds awesome, so make sure you subscribe and turn on post notification so that you don't miss any of my videos. In case you are a beginner in React, I have tried to make this a beginner-friendly tutorial. So we will start by creating a React app, and I am in React docs right here. And the first thing that you'll need to do is to have Node and npm installed on your machine. So to install Node, all you need to do is to do a simple Google search, install Node, and then choose the first option here, download Node.js. And once you click this link, you land into a page just like this one. So choose your operating system here and download an installer for Node. Once the installer is downloaded, just run the installer and Node will be installed on your machine. Now to make sure that Node is installed on your machine, all you need to do is to open the command prompt. So I'll come at the search bar here. I will type cmd and open the command prompt. So the command that you learn here is node-v, and once you enter, this will show you the version of Node that you are running. If you don't see the version that you are using, you'll know that Node is not installed on your machine. The next step is to go to the folder that you want to install your React app, and then you'll just go at the path here. You type cmd, and this will open that path on command prompt. And now you can see that we are in this particular path, and what we want to do is to run a command to create a new React app. So when I come back to docs here, this is the command for creating a new React app, npx create React app, my app. So my app here is the name of the React app that you want to create. So when I come to the command prompt and paste that command, I can change the name of the app to React Axios FB for Firebase and not Facebook. And this command will create a React app once we run it. Because I have already created a React app, I won't run this command, but for you, just go ahead and create a React app. It will take some time to process, but once it's done, you'll see a folder just like this one. Now we need to enter into this folder. So when I click it, you can see these files were auto generated by that command, And to navigate to that folder or directory in command prompt, all we'll need to do is to say cd and then the name of our React app, which is React hyphen Axios hyphen FB. When I enter, now we are inside our React app. Now I want to open our files in Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code is my preferred code editor. You can download the same if you want to have the same experience as me. Now we will use this command code and a period to open our files on Visual Studio Code. Now we have our files opened on Visual Studio Code, and we have several folders here, and the folder that we are most interested in is the src folder. So when I expand this, you can see that there are more files in this folder. I'll delete some of these files because we don't actually need them in this application. So I'll select setup test.js. I'll hit control and select service worker, the logo, and app test.js, and I'll also remove index.css. Okay, now I'll press delete and I'll remove these files. When we open index.js file, this is where we are injecting our app into the HTML file. So in our public folder here, we have a HTML file, and in this HTML file, when I scroll down, we have a div with an ID of root. So going back to index.js, you can see we are taking the app and we are injecting it into document.getElementById root. So it will take our app into that ID. And then I'll delete some of this stuff because we already removed the files that are associated with them. So I remove the service worker, I remove index.css file, and we can remain with those other imports. I'll then jump into app.js file, and we didn't remove the app.css file because we'll be making use of it, but we removed the logo, so I remove it. And then here we have some JSX tags. So JSX tags usually look like HTML tags. Okay, so if you know HTML, it's easy to understand JSX with some few differences. Like you can see, instead of class, we have class name. Okay, and then what I want to do here is to remove everything that is in here, and I'll also remove this class name. We remain with a pure div, and what I'll do here is to just type something like hello, and then I'll jump into app.css file. So I want to clear everything that is in the app.css file. I'll select everything in the app.css file and delete. So the CSS that we'll be using is a custom CSS that I coded, but in this video I don't want to focus more on the styling. I want us to focus on React and making the HTTP calls. So what you can do to get the stylings is to go to my GitHub repository called CRUD operations React Axios Firebase. I will leave a link at the description section below so that you can easily access it. And I have the completed project right here. So these are the files for the completed project. And all we want to do is to grab the CSS. So I'll open src, open app.css, and I'll grab the stylings for our app. So you can see all these stylings. We will be adding only the class names in our JSX. So I'll copy everything in here, Control C, and you can see that it have selected everything on the top. So what I'll do, I'll manually select these lines. Okay, so yeah, up to this point, Control C, and then I'll jump into our app.css file and paste everything in here. Now we can run our app and see if everything works. Okay, so in our command prompt, you can use this command to run our app. So npm start, enter, and that will run our app on the browser. So give it some time, it may take a while to load. So our React app have opened on localhost 3000, and you can see we have our text which we added, hello, and a dark background, meaning that our CSS is working and also our app is working without any errors. So what I want us to do is to come back to the code here, and I will minimize the public folder, and inside the src folder I will add a new folder called components. So this is where we will store all our React components. So components, inside this components folder, I will create a new component. So results.jsx. So I named it as JSX so that my code formatter can properly format the code, but you can name it results.js if you want. Okay. So I will enter that, and then right here I want to start creating a component, and I am using an extension. So when I come to extensions here, there is an extension called simple react snippets, this one here. So I'll be using these simple react snippets to create different components because it will be much faster and easier. For example, importing React, you only need to type imr to import React component, imrc to create a class-based component, cc to create a stateless functional component, sfc. Okay, so in our results.jsx, I want to create a class-based component, so I'll just type cc, and when I click the first option here, a class-based component will be added. Now all I need to do is to add the name of the component, which is results, and then inside the return here, what I'll do is that I'll type hello again here, and in our app.js file I'll remove the hello, and what I want to do is to include my results component here. So if I type results, I have this option here and click it. This is how we do it, and you can see that it was automatically imported at the top here. So right here, we need to wrap our hello inside something. I'll include a div here, okay, and this hello should be inside that div. Otherwise we would have got an error from that. So when I come back to my React, it's complaining that we haven't imported React and component. So what I can do is to come at the top here and import React component. So now that should solve our issue, and it is still working, and the hello have a single L, meaning all is good. I will add a class name of container. So class is equals to container, and this class is from our app.css file. So when I scroll at the top, we have this class. Okay, so the classes that we are using are from this file, and these CSS will still work here because our results.jsx is hooked on our app.js file. Okay, so it will still apply those styling even if we are not directly importing the CSS file here. So this results.jsx file will be our parent component for other components that we'll be needing, like results add component, and therefore that means that we'll be managing state in this particular component at the same time. So let's create the results add component. So in components folder, I'll add a new file called results add.jsx, and you can see how I am naming these files. Starts with a capital letter and also a capital letter here. This means that this is a React component, and this is a convention that is usually used. Okay, so when I enter, I'll create a stateless functional component if you want, because we won't be managing any state in this component. So I'll type sfc stateless functional component. I'll call this one result add, and you can see this is an arrow function, and then inside here I can type something inside a div, and let's say add, and in our results component I'll just remove this text that we added and replace it with our component. So I'll enter here and include it here, results add, and I will close it, and it will be automatically imported at the top here. When we go back to our React app, we should see add. So I keep forgetting to import React, so let me do that real quick. I'm sorry for this. So we should import React here, imr, and that should import React. Okay, so that it detects our JSX and other stuff. And you can see now add is at the very center, and this is so because we added a class of container here, and this class styles everything to be at the center of the page. Now what I want us to do is to style our form in this results add component. So this div will have a class name of results add, results-add, and then inside here we will have a form. So I'll just remove the add from there and include a form, and when I click on form, it will create the form tags. We don't have any action in this form, so I'll remove this. We will have 3 input fields and a submit button, and to start with, I want to start with a h2 here. So h2, enter, and what we want is to add new entry, and then after the h2 I will add a label, and this label is for the name. So inside the label I'll just type name, and then after this we will have an input field. So input, the type will be text, and then for the name we will add an autofocus attribute here. So autofocus, we will add a required attribute. So required, we will add a placeholder. Placeholder will be equal to name. So we will have a value which we will handle later, but for now I want this to be just blank. I will save this, and I'll copy these 2 lines and duplicate it 2 more times. So now we have 3 input fields. The second one will be unit, and this one will be grade, and then there is an attribute that I missed out, the name attribute. So name here will be equal to name, and then in our second input field here we won't have an autofocus, and we can include a name which will be equal to name. I'll show you how we'll make use of this name. Oops, actually this is not name but unit. And then the last one, we don't have an autofocus, and the name here will be grade. Grade. Now we still need to have a submit button. So right here I will just add another input field with a type of submit. Now let's go back to our React app and see what we have. And you can see this is our app. All these input fields are not nicely arranged, meaning that there is something we are missing from our CSS. So let me check that out. So in our form, we have several attributes, and we have a class name for our form, and the name that I gave here is UI-form. So this will enable our form to be properly styled, and we'll also add an attribute of autocomplete and set it to off. Okay, autocomplete will be off, and we'll also add some other attributes like an on submit event when submitting the form, but we'll handle that later. Let's go back, and when I refresh here, I don't know why it's not auto refreshing. Now our form is nicely arranged, perfect, and all these styles that are included on this form are in that app.css file. Okay, so you can check it out. Now let's start thinking how we will add data through this form. And as I said before, we will managing all our state in this component, results.esx component. So we can include the state that we'll be needing here. We will have a name, and then we'll have a unit, and then we will have a grade, okay, and we'll have an array of results. So this name unit grade is a single result, and we'll be handling its state here. But also, once we fetch the data from the database, we will have a results array, so we need to include it in our state. What we need to do is to make our results add to be a controlled component, because it doesn't have its own state. We will be managing the state in this other component, and how we will pass the data to this other component is by using props. Okay, so right here we can handle change. Every time we are typing in that form, we want to capture those inputs and store the inputs in the state. Okay, so right here I will create a handler called handle change. So handle change, and this will be an R function which accepts an event, and then in here we will do something, and all we want to do is to update the state every time we are typing on our form fields. Okay, so this is how we update the state by using this dot set state. This is a function which will set the properties of our new state, and here I will use the square brackets to target a certain input field. And how I will do that is using e dot current target dot name. Okay, so this name is the one that we included in our results add, so it will target this attribute here. So e dot current target dot name will target this name, and it will pick this value from the name. Okay, so simply this will be name, and then we set the name to e dot current target dot value, and this value is the value of the inputs that we will be typing on that particular field. So this will update the name state from null to whatever we will be typing, and then it will do the same for unit and for the grade. So when we start typing on the grade input field, it will pick the grade name and set its state to that particular value that we will be typing. Now we need to pass this to this results add form, and also we'll call our handle change function here using the onChange event. So on our results here, the first thing that we need to do is to destructure these properties from the state. So right here I'll say const, and then I use curly brackets. I destructure name, I destructure unit, I destructure grade, and this is from this dot state. Okay, so now I can pass these as props on our component here. So name will be equal to name, unit will be equal to unit, grade will be equal to grade. Okay, and then we'll also need this particular function, and how I'll pass it via props is handle change will be equal to this dot handle change, and we need to pass this inside the curly brackets because this is JavaScript. Okay, now what we are doing here is that we are passing the values of our state, unit, and grade via props, and also we are passing this particular function via props. So this is the difference between state and props. You can see that state is local, and how we can communicate between this component and this component is via props. So now in this other component, we can accept those values via props, and all we can do is to destructure them in here. Okay, so right here we can accept the name, and then we can accept the unit, we can accept the grade, and also we can accept the handle change. So now on our form, we can add an event listener for each of these input fields, and the event listener that we want is on change, and this will be fired every time we are typing on the form input field. And what we will do is to run this function. So I'll press handle change just right here, and we'll do the same for the other input fields. So on change handle change, and right here on change handle change, when I save, my code formatter will properly format the code, and I am using Prettier to format this code. Now we took name, unit, and grade from our state. Now what we need to do is to include it in our values here. Okay, so right here we set the value to be name, and then the value here will be unit, and then the value here will be grade. So now what is happening here? Let me just recap a bit. When we type something on this input field, this function will be fired. So handle change will be called, and this handle change we have defined it right here. And what it will do, it will update the state. So it will take the name of the input field, which is name, and then set the name to that particular value that we are typing, and update the state. Once it updates the state, it will set the value of that input field to be that particular state. Okay, so that is what is happening here, and the easiest way to show you this is through our React app. So when I come back here and refresh, our app is still working, and these were placeholders, right? Yeah, so what I can do for the placeholder, no, not really. Okay, we are not supposed to place them this way. We need to access it from our props. So we use curly brackets and name, and then here we use the curly brackets, we include unit. For the value here, we didn't include the value here. Okay, this is it. We use the curly brackets and we access the grade. Okay, so that's it. It shouldn't bring those values. Also, we need to update our placeholders here. So this is the problem of copy pasting stuff. This should be unit, this should be grade. And let's see what we have again, and name, unit, grade. So the cool thing is that I have a developer tool installed here called React Developer Tools. So you can download the same. It's very important when developing React apps. And if I come to console, I can see we have an error warning, invalid DOM property class. Did you mean class name? So in our results file, right here, we should have used class name, and I'll make sure that for the app.js we used class name. No, we didn't have any class there. So I hope the error have disappeared. So when I come to these arrows here, I can go to components, and these are coming through because of React Developer Tools. Okay, and when I click on results add, you can see we have props and the value of those props. Also, when I click results, you can see we have state and the value of those state. So when I type something, Chaoo, you can see that state is being updated directly. So now the value of state here is Chaoo, and when I come to results add, the value of the prop here is Chaoo. And then when I type the grade, maybe React, you can see now the props is being updated through the state. Okay, so this is cool because we are getting our values to the state, and now all we need to do is to grab those values from the state and then submit them to the backend, and that is what we are going to do next. I said we will be using Firebase real-time database. So come here and search for Firebase, and then I'll just select the first option here. So if you don't have a Firebase account, you may need to create one. I'll click get started. So as you can see, I have several projects here. All you need to do is to create a new project. So add project. Let's do this together. Enter the name of the project. I'll name it CRUD operations, and then I'll continue here. I don't want to enable Google Analytics for this project, so I'll just cancel that out and create the project. I will continue, and this will redirect us to our project. And what we want to do is to create a real-time database. So we have another database in Firebase called Cloud Firestore, and what we want to use is this real-time database here. So I'll click it, and then we will create a database. So I will start in test mode, and then I will continue. And you can see now that the database have been created and it's null. We can check at the rules and see if we are allowed to write and read in this database. So let's see. So we are allowed to read and write, although it's limited to up to a certain period. Okay, so for now this will work. And what we want to do is that we'll grab this link right here and use this link as our endpoint. So first of all, let's install Axios in our application, and Axios is the library that will help us to make HTTP requests to this database. Okay, so in our code editor here, you can open the terminal. At the top, you'll see terminal. You click new terminal, and it will be opened at the bottom here. And what we want to do is to install Axios. Okay, so npm install, I is for install Axios, enter. Now Axios is installed in our React app, and what I want us to do is to go here on our real-time database, and I'll select this link and copy it. Okay, so this will be our endpoint for our database, and then on our React app, I'll come to the SRC here, and I'll create a new folder. I'll call it Firebase, and then inside this Firebase folder, I'll create a new file called instance.js. So right here, new file, instance.js. Okay, and then inside this instance.js, we will import Axios. So right here, import Axios from Axios, and this should be in quotes. And then right here, we will export default, and we will create an instance of Axios. So Axios dot create, this will be a function, and we will pass an object in here and call this one base URL will be our link from Firebase. So in quotes, I'll paste that link right there. So now we won't keep copying this link. We'll just be using our instance file here to access it. Okay, so now that we have created the database, we have a link, and we have created an Axios instance, we can come back to our results.jsx file, and just below this one, we will create a new function called handle post, and it will accept an event, and then we'll do something in here. The first thing that we want to do is to prevent the default of submitting the form. Okay, and how we do that is to use e dot prevent default, and then we call that function. Okay, and to start with, we can log something to the console. So console dot log, we can say submitting. So we need to pass this function as a prop, like we did with this one right here. So right here, we will say handle post will be equal to this dot handle post, and we can accept that function as a prop from our results add component. So right here, I'll destructure it from props handle post, and we will run this function when submitting the form. So we can add an event listener right here called on submit, and this will be equal to this particular function. So this function will run every time we are submitting our form. Okay, so let's try this out and see if this message, which is right here, submitting, will be logged to the console. So back here, I'll go to our React app. Let's try to submit this form. Submit. Okay, we need to fill out these fields. I'll just enter some dummy data. Submit, and you can see now this is logging to the console. Now that this functionality is working, we can continue and try to add the data that we are typing in our state to the backend. So I will remove the console here, and then we can create a constant. So const data, and this data will contain everything that we want to take to the backend. So we will set the name to be equal to this dot state dot name. We will set the unit to be this dot state dot unit. We will set the grade to be this dot state dot grade. So this is taking the data from our state. Okay, once we type the data, the state will be updated, and we will set the data to be these particular properties, which will get the values from our state. Okay, and now once we do that, all we need to do is to push this data to the backend. And how we do that is by using Axios. So right here we will use our instance, which we haven't imported yet. So instance dot post. So this dot post is available on Axios, and we don't have of here. Instance dot post, and the first parameter is the endpoint that we want to post our data. So the cool thing about an Axios instance is that it will take that link that we included. Okay, let me show you. It will take the base URL here, and then our work is to complete that URL. By doing this way, we will pass a slash results. So these results will be automatically created at the backend. Okay, and then we should add a .json. Okay, a .json is a must when using Firebase, because this will be in form of JSON data. And then the second parameter here is this data that we want to take to the backend. So yeah, this will take a while, and therefore it will return something after a while, a promise. So we tap a dot then method here, and this dot then method comes with a response. So right here I can say response, and this we can set it to an arrow function and log the response to the console. So console.log response, and let's see if this data will actually be added to our real-time database. Okay, I will come back to our app, refresh, and see if everything is working. Actually, we haven't imported instance. Okay, let's do that. So I will import instance right here, import instance, and this will be from one step up and go into Firebase, and then we go into instance.js file. Now we can make use of instance without an issue. I will refresh. So let's type something here. Chaoo react grade submit. So you can see that something is logged to the console, which is our response, and the status is okay, meaning that this data was actually sent to our backend. And you can see now the ID that is returned for us for that particular post. So when we go back to database, you can see that we have now results here, and then inside the results this data was added, and this results is the name that we gave to our link here. So we added stroke results dot json and added the data. So to show you that, when I click this, you can see now the endpoint is this link which we added at our base URL in the instance, plus these results which we added here. Now all we need to do is to update the state once we send the data to the backend. And how we can do that is by coming at the bottom here, we can set a constant const results, and this results I want it to be our results array. Okay, so I'll say this is equal to an array. Use some spread operator, access the results state, this dot state dot results, a comma, and then we pass our object, which is this object right here, and I'll spread the properties of data. So these properties will be the one that will be included in here, and we add the ID, and the ID will come from our response. So the ID here will be response dot data dot name. I can save it and it will just auto format itself there. Once that is done, we can now update the state down here. So I can say this dot set state, and what we want, this is a function. What we want is to update everything that we have at the top. So we will set the name to be blank. So this will clear the form after we submit the data. Okay, and then the unit will be blank, and then the grade will be blank, and results. So we will set results to be these results. Okay, so results will be results, and this results is this one here, results. Cool. So now I can save that file, and we can try to submit the data again and see if our form clears. So at our name, Charles, unit node, grade A, submit, and once it's submitted, you can see that these values were cleared because the state is updated with empty values, and also the data is sent to the backend successfully. And when we come here to our components and go to results, you can see that now here results have a value. So the next thing that we will do, we will try to get our data here, all this data from the backend, and display them on our front end. Okay, in this section, let's try to fetch this data and display the data on our screen here. So I'll go back into my code editor, and just after the state here, I will call a lifecycle method called component did mount, and then in here is where we will perform a network request to fetch the data. So we will grab our instance which we imported here, so instance, and we will use the .get method which will get our data, and then the parameter here will be stroke results dot json. So you must also add .json here, and then stroke results will get our results, and the link that is in our instance.js will be added just before our results here. Okay, just like we did with our post method. And then this will have a response, so we tap a .then method here, and then inside this we can get a response, and then we can log this response to the console. So console.log response. So this function will run automatically when our component is being rendered. So we can go back to our app and see what is included in our response. So I refresh this, and then I'll go to the console. So I'll click this and go to the console, and here we have our response. And when we look at our data, we have these objects. So we have the data actually being fetched from our database, and we can see it on our response here. So what we can do is to grab this data, put it in an array, and then we update our state with that array. And how we are going to do that? We are going to use a for in loop, which will help us to put the data in an array. So right here we can say for let key in response dot data. So this will loop through our objects there, and then what we can do is define an array at the top here. So I'll define an array here, const fetched data, and this will define it to be an empty array. And when we come here inside our loop, we will add each of those objects in this array. So fetched data, and then we will use the dot push method. So this is an array method, and then in there this will be an object for each group, and then we will spread the properties of that object right here. Response dot data, and this response dot data has a key, and the key is that particular ID of each of those objects, and we want to store this key because we'll be needing it. So ID here will be equal to key. We are just adding an extra property to our object. So each object property will be spread, and then we add another property, which is the ID. Okay, now we have data being fetched right here. We are defining an empty array. We are looping through the objects and adding them to this empty array. Okay, now what we can do is to take this array which have updated data and set it to our state. So I'll first save this so that we can auto format that properly, and then just below our loop here I will set the state. So this dot set state, we call our function there, and inside here we set the results state, which is this array here, to be this array here which contain our fetched data. Okay, so this will be fetched data, and now below here we can console.log the state and see what we have in our state. Actually, you don't need console.log the state. Oops, I deleted the long line. I just wanted to remove this console and save the file. Okay, actually don't need to log the state. We can view the state from our React Dev Tools. So I'll refresh, and then when I go to components and go to results, you can check the state, and you'll see that we have now the data from the backend, and it's included in an array. And then we have each data right here, and each data have an ID, and this ID we added it through the key. So through this key we grabbed the key, which is the ID of each array, and added it as a property. So this is cool. And when we add now a new data here, maybe Charles, I can use JS and grade an A. When I submit, you will see that the state will be updated here, and it will be updated with the data that we have just added. And how we did this is by updating the state when we are posting the data right here. Okay, so each time we post the data, the state will be updated, and that data will be added to our fetched data from the backend. So that is cool. Now that we have our results in this state, we can pass the results to another component, which will help us to map through each data, and then will display the data on the screen. So what we'll do, we'll define another component just inside our components folder, and I'll call this one results list .jsx, and then inside this component we can import React, and then I'll create a stateless functional component, and we'll call this one results list, and then inside here we can just pass a div. We will fill it out later, but for now I want to import this component to our results component. So at the bottom here, after results add, I will add this component results list component, and when I call it that way, it will be automatically imported at the top. So make sure you also import it at the top. And what I want to do now is to pass this results array to this component. So right here, I'll destructure results from state, results, and then I'll pass it as a prop right here. So results will be equal to results. Now we can access our results via props in our results list component. So I'll destructure it here, and we need to use the curly brackets results. So now in this component, I gave the div here a class name of results display, and this will apply the necessary styling for our results. So results. So below here we can have a heading for our results, and then what I'll do is say results found, and just at the beginning we want the length of our array here. So we will say results dot length. So this will give us how many items we have in that array, and then a hyphen there. So we can check this out and see if we are getting something. I will refresh, and you can see now it's bringing 3 results found. So this is working. All we need to do now is to map through our array and then display each result at a time. So I'll just change this one to capital letter, and then below here we will map through our results here. So include these curly brackets results dot map, and this is an array method, and then in here we will get a single result, and what we want to do with this result is to pass it to another component that will help us to display our results. And let's create this component. I'll call it results display. So in our components folder here, I will add a new file called results display.jsx. Okay, and in this component we will handle it later, but we want to pass it right here. Okay, I will say results display, and we need to import it at the top. So this was not automatically imported because we haven't actually created this component, we just created the file. Okay, so let's import it here. Import results display from, and these are on the same folder, so results display. Okay, and then we can first create this component right here. This will also be a stateless functional component. First of all, we import React, and then we create a stateless functional component, and we will call it results display. And in here is where we will actually display our data. So first of all, I'll add a div. Okay, and we can complete our results list here. So what we are doing, we are getting our results here from props, and which is from the state. We are mapping through the results. We are getting a single result from that, and then we are passing that result right here as a prop. So result will be equal to this particular result. And then lastly, we need to add a key here. So key here will be equal to a result dot id. Another reason that we added an id there is because we'll be needing it to either delete a particular result or update a particular result. Okay, so that is a unique identity for each of result. So far so good. We are passing a single result to our results display. Now here we can extract that particular result from props, and then we can display it here. So I gave this a class name of all properties. So class name will be equal to all properties, and then I will use a span to display each property. So span, and each span have a class name of display, and I'll duplicate this span 2 more times, and then now inside here we can display the name of a particular result. Okay, so result dot name, and then here, and we need to wrap this with the curly brackets because this is some JavaScript there, and then here we need to do the same, result dot unit, and then here result dot grade. So I'll save this and go back to our browser, refresh, and now you can see we have the results displayed on the screen. We have a Chaoo, React A, and all this data is coming from our database. But when we add a new result now, let's add another one. Chaoo unit can be CSS, grade. Okay, all of them I'm getting an A. I submit, and it's automatically added here because the state will be automatically updated, but also the data will be sent to our database. So now you can see we have 4 results and they are displayed on the screen. So the next thing that we will do, we will work on removing a particular result from our list here. Now let's see how we can remove our entries here from the database and also from our UI. So I'll go back into my code editor, and in the results display component, just after the span tag for the grade, I will add a button tag. And this button tag will have a class name of remove btn -btn, and in here we'll simply have remove. I'll also include a HR tag after our button here. So now when I go back to my web, refresh, now you can see each entry have a remove button and a HR. The next thing that we want to do is to include some functionality on our button. So back into the code editor, I'll go to the results component, and after handle post, so handle post includes all this data. I will add a new method, okay, and this will be handle remove, which will be an arrow function accepting an ID of a particular entry that we will be removing, and then we will do something in here. So for now we can just console.log, and what we want is maybe delete and then comma ID. So we just want to see if we can log this to the console by clicking that particular button. So what we can do is to pass this as a prop, like we did with our handle post here, but this time we'll be passing it to results list as prop. So right here I'll say handle remove will be equal to this dot handle remove. So this is cool. Now we will go to our results list component. We destructure handle remove from props handle remove, and then we pass it again to our results display component. So this is the pain of using React without a state management library like Redux, or by using context API. You have to pass props level after level until you get the destination that you need it. So in our results display component, I will pass it again handle remove to be equal to handle remove. We can access the handle remove function in our result display via props. So handle remove, and now we can use it at our button. What we will do, we will just add an on click event, and this one will be equal to, we use an arrow function here so that we can call our handle remove with a parameter. So handle remove, and in brackets we pass the result dot id. Okay, now what will happen when we click this button, this on click event will be fired, and it will run our function handle remove with the result dot id. Our handle remove function will receive the id and log the id to the console. Let's try this one out. I'll go back to my web page here, refresh it, and I'll go to the console, place remove, and perfect. We are receiving a delete message, and also we are logging the ID to the console. When I click this one, you can see now the ID is different. So our functionality is working there. Now let's go ahead and remove this particular entry or any particular entry from our list. So what we will do, we will use our instance which we had imported above. So right here we will say instance dot delete, and then we will pass the endpoint. So right here we will use some backticks so that we can use some JavaScript on our string. So some backticks, and then we will do as we did with our other strings here. We start with stroke results, but this time we want to append an ID of a particular result. So I'll use $, curly brackets, and I pass the ID in here. So how is this coming along? When I come to my Firebase here and click this particular result, you can see our endpoint changes to results stroke the ID of that particular result. So this is what we are doing, okay? And then don't forget to include .json at the very end. So this should remove that particular entry from the database. Now we can tap a .then method, and this will be receiving a response, and we can use an arrow function to log the response to the console. So console.log response. So the response of a delete method here is usually null. Okay, so the data is null, but you can see if the status is okay and stuff like that. Let's try this one out. Try to remove this one, remove, and it's not removed from the UI, but it is removed from the database. So you can see the status is okay and the data here is null, and we have the URL right there. Now when we come to the database, we were having 4 results, but now in our database, when I go to results, wait a minute for it to load, we have 3 results. They are not 4. So the data was actually removed from our database. So now what we need to do is to update our UI. So when I go to our components here and go to results, you can see that in our state we still have all the 4 objects. So these, all the 4 are there. All we need to do is to remove one of those from the state. Once we remove it, so I'll go back to my handle remove method and we will update the state. So right here I'll say this dot set state. I call that function, and inside here we can change the results state, which is an array of objects. So what we will do here is that we will use the filter method, which is an array method. So I'll say this dot state dot results, and then we use the dot filter method here. So dot filter, and what we want to do is that here we will receive each result. So we will be looping through each results in our state, and then we will remove the one that have this particular ID. Okay, so right here we receive a result from this filter, and then this we can use an arrow function. We access the ID of each result.id. We remove the one that is equal to this ID. We will use an exclamation mark here, and this will means not equal to ID. So we will remain with the results which the result.id is not equal to this particular ID. So basically this one will be excluded from our array. And now this should update our UI because we are displaying our results from our state. Now let's go back, and I can expand this one, and you can see after refreshing the page we have now 3 results found, but we don't want to keep refreshing the page so that we can see that this was removed from our UI. So what we can do is remove the CSS here, and you see it's gone, and our result state is updated to only 2 objects, and now it's also removed from the database. We only have 2. So our remove functionality is working. Next we'll see how we can update a particular result. Now in this section I want us to handle the update, and when handling the update, we will have an update button here. When we click that button, we want to open a React model, and then we will have a form where we can perform our update. So the first step is to add a button here. I'll go back to my text editor, and after the remove button, I will add another button with a class of edit hyphen btn, and then the text here will be update. And now when I come back to my React app and refresh, we have an update button, but I am guessing we have named something incorrectly. This should be hyphen btn, okay, so that it apply the necessary styling from our app.css file. So yeah, there we go. Now we have a cool update button. Now what we want, when we click this, we open a React model, and then we'll perform the update on that model. Okay, so to use React model, we first have to install it. So just open the terminal, and what you need to do is to type npm I react hyphen model, and this should install React model in your React app. So I have already done this and I won't repeat it. So just run that command and it should install React model. Now in this particular component, results display.jsx, what you need to do at the top here is import model from React model, and then this is a component from React model. We can use this component at the bottom here after our HR tag. Okay, now I will use the component model, and we can use an opening and a closing tag so that in here we can add some content. So I can say something like model is opened. Now how React model works is that we have a prop here called is open, and this prop accepts Boolean value, which is either true or false. When this is true, the model should open. When it's false, the model should close. So I'll go back to my React app and refresh and see if the model is opened. And you see model is opened, so that is working. And when the model is open, you can see that we have an error at our console. So what we can do to eliminate this error is to run this particular function. I'll just copy the way it is. Okay, this model.setup element and then element in there. Okay, so I'll come back here, and even before we start defining our component, I will include that function right there, model.setup element, and in here we need to set the ID where our React app is being hooked to our HTML, and the ID is hash root. Okay, now this should eliminate that error when the model is opened, and let for it to run. I refresh, wait for the model to open, and the error is gone. Perfect. So the next thing that we want is that every time we press the update button, we want to toggle between true and false here. Okay, so initially I'll just remove that value, and then I'll go to our results.jsx component, and I'll add a new property at our state. And the property that we are setting here is model is open, and initially this should be false, so the model is closed by default. Okay, and then we can pass this prop up to our results display component. So I'll come at the very bottom, results list. I'll add the prop. First of all, I'll destructure it from state. So here we destructure model is open and pass it as prop right here, model is open will be equal to model is open. I'll save that file to auto format that long line. Now we can receive our model is open prop at our results list. So I'll destructure it from props. Model is open, and then I'll pass it as prop right here. Model is open will be equal to model is open. I'll also save to auto format that long line. Okay, now we can receive that prop again on our results display component. So model, and this should be small, is open. Okay, now we can use this model is open at our is open right here. So right here I can say model is open, which is false, right? We can test this one out by coming to results.jsx and setting this one to true, and we see if the model will be open, just to see if everything works. Okay, so true. Now I can come to my web page, refresh, and let's see if the model will open, and it's working. So that is working. Now I return this back to false. Okay, and then I'll create a function to handle model open. So just after the handle remove function, I'll add another function here, and I'll call it handle model open. This will be an arrow function, and then we can do something in here. And all I want us to do is to change the state. So I can say this dot set state, and we will update the model is open to true. Okay, now every time we click the update button, we want to run this function and update the state to true, and that will open the model. So let's pass this function all the way to our results display component, like we did with handle remove. So right here, handle model open will be equal to this dot handle model open, and we do a destructuring here from the props of handle model open. So handle model open, I use a comma so that we can also destructure this, and now we can pass it again right here. Handle model open will be equal to handle 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 model open. Let's destructure our handle model open from result display. So I'll start with a comma and then handle model open. Now when we click update button, we want to run this function, and we will do the same as we did with this one. I'll just copy it the way it is, and then I'll include an onClick event there and change handle remove to handle model open, and I'll also remove the ID. So I remove the ID so that it just run that way. We may include the ID later, but for now we just want to see if the model is opening. So I don't know why we have some errors here, expecting a curly closing bracket right there. Oh, perfect. Now let's see if our model will open. And so I'll come back, refresh, and let's click update. Model is opened. Perfect. So back in our results.jsx component, I'll go at the top and I'll create another function to change the state back to false. And the function, since it's similar to this one, I'll just duplicate it at the bottom here. And then I will say handle model close and change the state here to false. So every time we want to close the model, we will be running this particular function, and we need to pass it all the way to our results display component. Let's pass it as prop right here. Handle model close will be equal to this dot handle model close. Perfect. Now let's go ahead to our results list and destructure it from props. Handle model close. Okay, and we pass it just right here. I'll duplicate this. I'm getting tired of typing, so I'll just select this handle model open, use Control D to also select the other one, and then I can edit open to close, and then I can go to results display and destructure it from prop again. So right here, handle model close. So nice. Now in our model component, we usually have another prop which will run a function of closing the model, and this prop is called on request close. And what we want to do is to learn this particular function right here. So I'll use an arrow function and we run handle model close. So I'll save this and test this one out. Okay, so you can see that we don't have a button for closing the model. We will add our own custom button for closing the model once we add a form of updating our data. So first of all, I can show you how this one works. So I'll refresh. I'll click update, model opens. Now when you click at the overlay here outside the model here, it should close the model, but it's not working. So the issue that we have is that I didn't call this function right here, so I should call it that way. Now when I click outside the model, it should close that model. So open, click out here, and it closes the model. Perfect. And also the escape key should close the model. So now this is working. The next thing that we want to do is to include the content of our form here. But before we do that, we can customize our model further to fit our React app theme. So you can see this is so bright while our theme is dark. So let's do some styling. So our model component also accept a style. So at the end here, we can include a style prop, and this will be an object, and we include another object in there. First of all, I can save to auto format this so that we clearly see what we are doing. So the first thing here is usually an overlay, and the changing that I'll be making is for the background color. So background color, and I will set this one to this value right here, RGBA, and then 255, 255, 255, and we need some comma separation here. So I need some comma separation. So this is white, and then the last parameter here will be 0.2 for opacity, so it will be transparent. So I can come back, and when I refresh, open the model, you can see now this is transparent right here, the overlay. Now let's tell our content. So we can add another property to this object called content, and I include a comma, and now we can add some few more styling. So I'll scroll down. First of all, I'll set the border to none. We will set the background to hash 000, which is dark. We'll set the display, so this is now centering the content. So display will be flex, and then align items will be center, and you can see these are camel casing because this is JavaScript and not pure CSS. So center, and then we will have justify content to the center. So that's all we need for the content. We can go back and see if the effect have taken place. I will refresh and update. Now you can see that our model have a background color of black, but this is not at the center, meaning that we may have made an error somewhere. So background, display flex, align items, center, justify, content, center. So I guess everything is fine. Let's go ahead and add a form for now updating our data. So first of all, we will create the form. So in our components, I'll add a new file, and I will call this one results update.jsx. Enter. Now the good thing with this file is that we will be using a similar styling as our results add component. So I'll grab everything that is in here, I'll copy and go back to our results update component and paste it here. And now we can do just some few customization. We will be importing all of these, okay, except for handle posts. We'll have a function called handle update. Okay, so I can just change this one to handle update, and this one to handle update when submitting the form. So that's perfect. Now we need to change this new entry to update entry. Okay, name will be name, autofocus, everything else will be the same. Okay, even the value, the unchange, the unit, and the only thing that we will change is our button here. I'll say value is equals to update, so that now that is what will be displayed. Okay, another thing that we need to change is the name of our component here. So I'll control D, and that is not working. I'll select the whole of these, control D, we select even at the bottom, and what I want to do is to remove add and change it to update. So that's perfect. Now let's import our component, this component, in results display.jsx. So actually I'll just use it here and it will be auto imported. So right here I'll say results update, and I close that one. So when I go to the top, we have the results update imported at the top there. Okay, now let's see what we have. I'll go back to my browser here, update, and you can see our form is right here, and this is not displaying anything. Warning, React does not recognize the update prop. Okay, I'll come back to my results update and go to the button, and we use this as a prop instead of as a value. So I remove and change it to update. Another thing is that we need a close button to close our model on this form. Okay, not everyone may think of pressing the overlay or pressing escape. Okay, so just after the form, I will add a button, and this will have a class name of close btn, so is equals to close hyphen btn, and then in here I will just say close, and what we need to do is to learn our handle model close function, which is in our results component, but we passed it through props up to this point for on request. Okay, so you can see we have handle model close here. So what we can do is to pass this handle model close as a prop to results update. Okay, so I'll say handle model close will be equal to handle model close, and this will be from props. Okay, we had already done that. It's from props right here. So now when we come to results update, I'll do it at the end here, handle model close, and when I scroll at the bottom, we can run that function on our button. I use an arrow function to run this particular function on close click, so handle model close, and I run that function. So let's go back to our React app, refresh, click update, model opens, it have a close here. When I click close, and it's not working, I'll come back and check. So on click, and let's see, update, close, perfect. Now for the form, you can see it's overflowing. What we can do is come at the top here, and for this div I'll say results edit. So I just changed the class name back, and let's see what happens. Open, and now it doesn't overflow. So enough of React model. Let's now figure out how we can make this form to actually update our data. So the first thing that I want us to do when we open the model, I want us to update the state of our form values right here. So when I come back to my code editor here and go to results, when we open the model, this is the function that we are running, handle model open, and we are updating the state of only model is open to true. Now I want us to update also the state of our form values, which is name, unit, and grade. Okay, so how can we do that? First of all, I will call this handle model open with an ID of the result that we have clicked. So back in results display.jsx, I'll go to this button where we are calling handle model open, and all I'll do, I'll pass this result.id like we did with our remove button here. Okay, so I'll paste that there, and then we can receive that ID just right here. So handle model open, we can receive the ID. The next thing, well, is to get the result that have this particular ID from our array. Okay, from our results array. How we can do that is by using an array method called find. Okay, so right here I will define a constant. I'll call it result, and then we will say this dot state dot results k dot find. Now this is the array method, and how this one works is that it will return a particular result. So right here we will find a result, and the result that we are finding is the one where the result dot id, now this is from our array here, okay, will be equal to the id that we click from uh, from our list. Okay, so this will return that particular result, and then we can now update the state. So right here we can set the name to be result dot name, comma, the unit to be result dot unit, and then the grade to be result dot grade. Also we can pass in the id, so id will be result dot id, and perfect. So now this will update our form values with that particular result that we are trying to update. Also here there is a comma, and we need to pass these props all the way to our results update component. As you can see, we had already restructured them here, and also we need to pass handle change all the way to this component. Okay, let's do that. So let's pass all those stuff to our results list component, and the good thing is that we had already done them here. So I'll just copy them and paste them down here. That's good. Let's go on to our next component, which is results list component. We destructure all those props right here: name, grade, unit, and then I'll save. This is so long, and then right here we will have handle change, perfect. Now we need to pass them down here. I'll just paste, and I need to remove this handle, this dot, so that we only have handle change. Now let's go ahead to our results display component, destructure everything from props right here: name, comma, unit, comma, grade, comma, and handle change. And we need to pass that to our results update component. So right here I'll just paste whatever I had just copied, and then when I save, these will be arranged nicely, so I don't need to struggle with that. In our results update component, we are already destructuring those 4 props and using them properly. So let's test this one out. I'll go back, refresh, wait for everything to load, click update, and we have an error. So let's see what's not happening. Cannot read property find of undefined. I'll check this one out in our results component. So yeah, this is not supposed to be set state. I'm sorry for this. This is supposed to be state. Okay, that's why that array method is not working. What we are doing, we are accessing results. This dot state dot results. Perfect. So this should work now. Let's see if we have another error. Click update, and perfect. Now you can see that our fields are already filled with what we want to edit, and when we type, we are updating the state using the handle change method. So if I go to components here, and you can see the state here, and when I try to change anything, we are changing the state. So now the only thing that remains is to create a new function called handle update, and we will take our values from this form, or from the state rather, and update the backend of our application with that particular data. Let's do that real quick. So right here, we will define another method, handle update, and this will be an arrow function. So handle update will be run every time we click the update button and we are submitting a form, right? So we'll have an event here, and we want to prevent the page from reloading by doing an e.prevent default and running that function. And then the next thing that we want to do, when we submit the data, we don't want to keep the model open. We just want to submit the data and close the model. Okay, so right here, I reset the state, this dot set state, and remember what we are changing, it's only this one here. So this should close the model, and then this should be inside the brackets like that. Okay, perfect. Now let's go ahead and pick our data from the state. And how we will do that is the same way we did when submitting a form. So I'll come to handle post, and I'll just grab this one, come at the very bottom, and then I paste it here. So we are defining the data, and it's from the state. Okay, and remember the state is already updated when we open the model here. And then now we can send this data to the backend. How do we do that? So I'll come right here, I'll say instance, and the method that we use here is the dot put method, and we need to access that particular path of the data that we are trying to update, like we did with our handle remove. So I'll copy this the way it is, copy, and I'll come down here where we have handle update and paste it in here. So we'll go inside the results stroke. We are not receiving any ID here. We can access the ID from the state, and that is why we updated the state here with an ID. So what we can do is in here we can say this dot state dot id. So we are grabbing the id from the state, and also remember to add dot json at the end. And then for the put method, unlike the remove, we have a second parameter here, and the second parameter is the data that we are trying to send back to the backend. So this data, we pass it as a second parameter there. Okay, and then after that we can tap a dot then method, which will of course have a response, and then we can use an arrow function and log the response to the console. Console.log response. Okay, so this should actually update our backend data. Okay, and let's see what we have. So we can test out the application. Let's update this one to something like CSS. Update, this will be CSS. So when I click update, the model is closed and nothing happens. So something is wrong somewhere, and this is actually refreshing the page. I don't want that behavior at all. So I have realized something. We haven't actually called this method. Okay, we haven't actually called this method every time we are clicking the button. So we should go at the very top bottom and pass it through props. So handle update will be equal to this dot handle update, and we'll pass it all the way up to our result update component. Right here I'll pass it, and then I don't need this. I'll copy this again to make it easier for me, and I also need to destructure it from props, so I'll paste it and remove this part, and then we pass it to results display and destructure it from props. Remove all of these. Oops, I removed the wrong one. Remove this one, and then at the very bottom. Okay, and then now in our results update component, we are destructuring it and we are calling it on submit. Let's try this one out again. Okay, refresh. I'll click update here, and then you can change this to CSS. So you can see now our state have CSS update, it crosses, but we don't see the changes. So the changes have actually happened. The only thing is that we aren't updating our state. So in case I refresh, this should be CSS now. Let's see. Perfect. So the update is working for the backend. All we need to do is to update our UI, and that will be very simple. How we will do that is that in our results.jsx, I'll go at the top to where we were fetching the data in our component didMount method and where we were updating the state. So grab everything that is in here. So I'll grab it, and then I'll come at the handle update method, and just after updating the data, I'll do another network request, and I'll do it inside here. Okay, so after the console here, I'll paste everything. So this should update the state when we run that function. So let's try this one out. I refresh. Now update. Let's change this back to React. I'll click update. It's closed, and after some time React is updated. The good thing with React is that the only state that has changed is the one that will be updated, so only this will change. And now we have another issue here. These fields are already filled, and that is because these two forms are kinda interlinked because they are using the same values from the state. So what we can do after updating the data is to reset our form fields just at the bottom here. So right here we'll set the name to blank, the unit to blank, and then the grade to blank. So this should update our form fields to empty values. So let's test this one out. I'll change for the node right now, update, and wait a minute. Here we have an issue. When I click for node, it's bringing in React. We have an issue with our find. Why is it? With our find right here. First of all, what we need to do is update the state here. When we are closing, we also need to reset the form values, and then name unit will be none, and then the grade. So every time we are crossing, we are also updating the form values grade. Okay, and model is open will be false. So this is the handle model close function. So when I come back and refresh, click update, and then when we close, this should be empty, update, and still this one is here. We should use 3 equal sign here for equality and not a single equal sign. So that should solve that problem. I'm sorry for that. Let's go back and close. I'll wait for it to refresh. Let's click on node, and perfect. Now this is working correctly. Okay, now let's update and see if I'll set this to be update, and yeah, these values are gone after a while. It's actually clearing that value and it's updating everything here. So the next thing that I want us to do is to show a spinner every time we are updating. So when I update, when I set an A update, it's taking some time before it displays the update and also before it clears the values. So within that period of the network request, I want us to show a loader, and once everything is done, we will show the screen with the updated data, and we'll do the same for the submit right here. Another thing is that I want us to display some cool messages using React toastify. So when we submit, we show the user that the data have been submitted. When we update, when we remove. Okay, so that is the next thing that we are going to do in the following section. So in this section, we are going to install 3 more libraries. So at the bottom here, you can see npm install. There is React loader spinner, and this will help us to display a spinner when making a network request. And then we have React promise tracker, and React promise tracker will help us to wait for a promise to complete. And when the promise is in progress, we'll display a React loader spinner. And then lastly, we have React toastify. Okay, so if I minimize this, you can see this is React toastify, and React toastify will help us to display toast messages or pop-ups whenever we perform a particular action in our application. So just run this command and install these 3 libraries. So I have already done it. So when you check at the top here, I have already installed those libraries. Okay, I'll just close the panel, and then the first thing that we need to do is to create a new component for our loader. So just at our components folder, I'll add a new file and I'll call it loading. Okay, and then JSX. So right here we will import React, and then we'll create a stateless functional component, and I will call our component loading. Okay, that way. Now we need to import several stuff right here. The first one is a component from React loader spinner. So right here I'll say import loader, and this will be from React hyphen loader spinner, and then in our return statement here we will create a div, and this div will have a class name of loader, and this is a class name that I created in order to customize my spinner so that it display on the whole page and above everything else. So if I come to app.css file, you can see here we have a loader styling, so you can go through this. So let's go back to our loading component, and then in here we can make use of this component which we are getting from React loader spinner. So right here I'll say loader, and this loader, it have a type. So right here we'll pass a type. So this is a prop, and what we want to use is 3 dots. So 3 dots, and then we will have a color. So right here just copy this code hash 2BA and then D60. So this is greenish. Oops, this is D60. Okay, and then we can give it a height of 100 and a width of 100. So these are some of the props that you can include, and they are provided by our loader component. So we need to import something else here. Now this is from React Promise Tracker. So import use promise tracker, and it's from React Promise Tracker, and this is a method. So what we will do right here, just before our return statement, we will say const and destructure something here, promise in progress, and this is from use promise tracker, and we invoke that method right there. This will be either true or false. Okay, so what we need to do is wrap our div here inside brackets, and we use promise in progress right here. So promise in progress and this now. Okay, so what is happening here? When we track our promise, it will either return true or false. So when promise is in progress, this promise is in progress will be true, and if it's true, we will show our loader, else this will be false, and if it's false, we won't show our loader. So that is what is happening here, and you can learn more from the documentation of React Promise Tracker, and also you can check out React loader spinner. Okay, so now what we need to do, we have this component, right? We need to import it at our app.js. It needs to be at a high level of our app. So in our app.js, we need to import that loading component, and the easiest way I can do that is to just use it here. So loading, and it will be auto imported. So that's cool. Now the next thing that we need to do is to track our promises. So in our results.jsx file, we need to import something from React Promise Tracker. So right here, we'll say import track promise, and this is from React-promise tracker, and this is a method which we can use to track our promises. So everywhere where we have a request and we want to track that particular promise, we can wrap it inside this particular method. So the first thing here is when we are for initializing our app. So the first time we load our app, this component did mount will run, and we can track these particular network requests. So what we can do is I'll select the whole of these and then wrap it inside brackets, and at the beginning here I'll say track promise. So we are invoking this method which is from React Promise Tracker. Okay, so I need to remove this semicolon, it's throwing an error, and now it's properly auto formatted. So now this promise will be tracked, and then when it is in progress we will show a loader, because now this promise in progress will be true and will show the loader. Now let's do the same for other network requests, and the next that we need to track is for handle post. So this is where we are making the network request. I'll just wrap this one inside the brackets and then remove this particular semicolon at the end here and include track promise right here. So track promise. I will save, and that will be properly auto formatted. Now I'll do the same when we are updating our data. So I will come to handle update, and this is where we are making the network request. I wrap the whole of this inside the brackets and remove this semicolon, and again I use track promise. When I save that, that will be properly auto formatted. Now we can test our application and see if this works. So I'll refresh here. You can see we have a loader there when we are initially loading our app, and the data is loaded. Now we can try to add something here. I can say Charles, unit can be JS, grade and name. When I submit, we have a loader, and once the data is posted on the backend, we can now see the content. Let's try our update. So let's update this to JavaScript. Now when I update, we have a loader, and once it's done, we see the content. So that is cool, that is working. The next thing that we need to do is to add react toastify, so that when we add, we can see a toast message saying that we have added the data. So I'll go back to my code editor, and we had already installed react toastify, and the first thing that we'll do is to go to app.js file. So the first thing that we will do here is to import a component from React Toastify. So import toast container, and this is from React-Toastify, and then we need to add our toast container component just right here, toast container, that way. The next thing is to import some CSS from React toastify. So at the bottom here, we will import a CSS file, import react toastify stroke dist stroke react toastify dot css. So this will import react toastify css to our application. So react toastify stroke dist stroke react toastify dot css. Now the next thing we need to do is to go to our results.jsx, and we will import something from react toastify. We will import toast, and this is from react toastify. So I need to wrap this one in some quotes, and then toastify. Okay, that way. Now we can make use of this toast. Okay, so everywhere we have a method for doing a network request, like the handle post, we can use our toast. So at the very bottom, once we send the data to the backend and update the state, what I want to do is to use our toast. Okay, so right here I'll say toast dot success. So this will display a green message, and you can enter your custom message right here. So you can say you added a new entry, that way. So you can enter your own message the way you want, and then we can go to a handle remove, and we want to display an error message, although it's not an error, but I like that red color for the remove. So after this one, we will say toast dot error. So this is not an error, only that I like this message because it have a red background for remove. So right here I'll say entry removed, and I can include 3 dots, and then we can go to where we are updating our data. After we update the state here, after this function, I'll say toast dot info. So this will display a blue message, and we can say entry updated, and I include 3 dots. So let's test and see if our toastify is working. I'll go back to my application here, refresh, the loader is working, and then we add a new entry. So maybe Chaoo CSS grade A, submit, loading. After it's posted, you added a new entry. So our toastify container component is working, and then we can try to update. Maybe this is required in capital letters. Update, the loader is working, and entry updated. So maybe we didn't want anything to do with CSS in our entry. I can remove, and entry removed. So perfect, everything is working, and that's it for this tutorial. So I hope you have really enjoyed in this tutorial. If you haven't subscribed yet to my channel, please make sure you do subscribe. Also like this video and share with your friends who would like to know how to perform CRUD operations using React, Axios, and Firebase.